Hey there guys, welcome to this episode of Barrels and Business. As always, I am your host, Jade Green, and it is my job to bring you some of the amazing guests from around the world that can share not only their tangible tips on how you can grow an epic business, scale your empire, live your perfect day, and share some stories about amazing surf trips. Today, I am joined by none other than Brian Swan. Brian is the unstoppable surfer. As you can see by his beard, he's also the founder of the Unstoppable Beard. He'll tell us more about that later. And the branding agency, the Unstoppable Branding Agency. This man, though, shot to fame, I'm going to say, to start off with, as the Unstoppable Family. And I think we can coin him and crown him as the first digital nomad family. After escaping being a robotics engineer and selling like boring robots to like rocket scientists like Elon Musk, to traveling the world with his family and growing an amazing epic little human in Hanalei. Let's hear more from Brian. Welcome to the show, Brian.
Well, thank you very much, Jade, for having me on. It's an absolute pleasure joining you from Bali, Indonesia. If you can see a video, if you can't, I'm overlooking some of the best surf breaks in the world, and it's my pleasure to be joining you here. And
I am
met you
so
here
jealous. Yeah, we met at Karamis, the World Surf League break, but you're up at the Bukit, right? You look over Impossibles and Ulus.
Bingin, Ulus. Bingin's is right here, Uluwatu down there, and Padang. So I'm all within I actually did on my 47th birthday just last Sunday, on the big swell that we had last Sunday. I surfed Ulus, Padang, Impossibles, and Bingin. And that was my first time I ever did it, and it was one of the best things. I'm not sure if I'm going to do the round again, but yeah, it was a high moment in my life, I'd say.
Did I see a snapped board from that session, or was that from a different session?
That was the morning after Padang.
Heavy. I actually learned how to go left at Bingin. Because you can't go right.
You can't go right. No, that's a good place to learn. Right on.
As a kid, when I surfed, I rode a longboard, and I'd if I was going to go left, I'd have to switch foot. Like I'd jump up, and everyone thought it was some sort of trick. It was just me being slightly retarded. So I'd switch to go left, but at Bingin you have to learn to jump up pig dog and not drag your butt across the reef.
Absolutely.
So not only did you have your 47th birthday last weekend, you had your amazing Unstoppable Mama's 48th birthday just recently too, is that correct?
Yeah, we're 4 days apart, so we just went over to Nusa diving, a little surfing, and now we're back into the action here.
My two favorite places, like when I used to work in Bali all the time, as you know, I was at Karamis, but if I was taking my downtime, my holiday time, I'd go to Bingin. I loved just being down on the cliff where there was no internet reception, or going to Lombongan, staying on the cliffs, looking at playgrounds.
Yeah, no, I love Lombongan. It's beautiful, and it's just a half an hour, boat ride away, so it's beautiful.
Oh, amazing. Did you get any waves while you were in Lombongan?
I actually did not. I brought my boards, but I was full on mom's, wife day. So we did the diving thing. Last time scored shipwrecks, which was really good.
I've never hit shipwrecks, but I did break my coccyx at playgrounds. That was fun.
Wow.
Had to have coral removed from my bum. Yeah, not a great experience. So does Rhonda, your wife, still surf? I've seen photos of her with boards.
She has not. We've been together for 23 years, and we met actually surfing in San Diego, California. So she actually paddled up. I met her there. We've been together ever since. That was in May of 1998. And
wow.
I was a robotics engineer. She was in the corporate world, and hit it off. And then in 2006, she retired me from my corporate job, and rest is history. I can share a little bit more on that as well.
Yeah, talk me through that. Now, was that
California.
because you were having Hanalei and you didn't want to have her go to preschool, or walk us through that journey?
All right, so this is kind of, I'm gonna rewind it from, because I think also you were a recruiter for Parker Hannifin. I used to sell robotics engineering corporate for nearly 10 years. I was in a suit and tie, selling for the semiconductor biotech industry, and I was learning how to surf. My wife and I only picked it up when I was 20 years old, and we were living like kind of like the American dream, right? We had the cars, insurance, we were buying the houses, bought our first house in like 2000. The real estate market was just ramping up. It was like ideal. Um, she actually broke her back. She broke her tore her hamstring in the Metawise back in 2004 when we were still working in corporate, and that was pretty much the end of her surfing days. Because then
Oh,
shortly after that, she was pregnant with Hanalei. She had a few bad accidents, and now she hasn't surfed. But now I got Hanalei surfing with me. But you know what happened was, it's really interesting on how we're talking about how I'm in Bali, and after the trip in 2004, I remember being in it was in Kuta, and I'm in my late 20s, I think, and I'm like, let's go party, and I remember her looking at me. My wife was looking at me, and she goes, "There's got to be something more to life than just what we're living." And I'm like, I'm looking at her going, "What are you talking about?" I go, "We have six-figure jobs. We don't have to work a lot. I mean, it was kind of, even though we had prestigious jobs, we could slack off. In the corporate world, you can just slack off. You kind of do the minimal amount to where you don't get fired, but you still can earn a good pay and stuff." And I'm like, and she goes, "But there's more to life." And I remember just looking at her going, "Well, what? We're taking a trip, a 2-week trip to Bali and the Metawise," and she's like, "There's more." And it was at a point where my wife, she was working for a pharmaceutical company, and that's one of the reasons she left the pharmaceutical company, because she was seeing what's really going on behind the scenes. But she witnessed a one of her coworkers. She stepped into a meeting on Monday morning, and my wife was there, and this lady came in 15 minutes late, and she's like, "I'm so sorry I'm late. I just had to drop off my 6-week-old child in daycare." And the boss looked at her, and she says, "Do you want to keep your job?" And she's like, "Yeah." She goes, "Well, you're going to be putting your child in daycare every day from 6:30 in the morning, and you pick her up at 6 p.m. at night." And the lady was crying, and it was just, my wife just looked at that moment. And this was in 2004, 2005, 2004. And we had just bought our first $1 million house. We had already bought another one. Things were good. We're living in California, and we're a month into it. And she came back from that meeting. She didn't say a thing to me that night, but we went to check the surf, as we do every morning before we get into our cars and go wheel and deal with our corporate world, right? We're both in sales. And she looked at me while we're having coffee, looking at the surf, and she goes, "I want to have a family." And I'm like, "Yeah, that's why we bought a 5-bedroom house, to fill this thing." And she looked at me and she said, "I'm not going to put my children in daycare." And I just kind of looked at her and went, "Well, I don't care if I'm my boss's boss's boss. I'm not going to have enough money to provide for this mortgage." And she said, "You better get a better job." I go, "Why don't you find something you can work from home?" And back in the day in 2004, that was kind of like one of those, like, now it's like, "Oh yeah, I could, find something online," because everything's online. There's so, like, and if you're not doing something online, you're kind of crazy, even if you have a brick and mortar business. But that was back in the day. I was kind of joking, and she's like, "Okay." And then it was like a few weeks later, she's like, she goes, "I found something, and I want you to see it." I'm like, "Oh, you go figure it out." And I thought she was absolutely crazy. She quit her job before she made any money. And lo and behold, she had like a $47,000 a month. And I was just like, I was blown away, because she was also learning like personal development. This is before the movie The Secret. So I'm just putting a time frame on, like that was kind of
I
like
was
what,
sharing
oh,
a serviced office with Google. So Google had come to Australia and didn't even have their own office. We shared an office space. That's how long ago this was.
Yeah. Well, when we got started in the online world, Facebook, YouTube was just launched. Facebook didn't exist. Obviously, Instagram didn't. None of the social media wasn't out there. And but she was also becoming this incredible person. And I was like, she's making more money than I am in my corporate world as a robotics engineer. She's becoming a better person. I'm like, man, it's like I'm gonna join you on this train. And I quit my job roughly about a year afterwards, and it was mostly like I wanted to surpass our incomes, and we were just riding on fire, making 50, 60, 100K a month, and we're just like buying real estate. We're just wheeling, dealing, cars, everything. It was just like and we thought we were setting up our daughter so she didn't have to worry about money. And in 2007, we had our daughter, Hanalei Swan, on April 17th. A couple weeks later, we went from multimillionaire status to losing everything. And it was like the worst about year and a half of my life on mental mind fuck, just of what's going on, thinking you have it all and then losing it all. And it was at a point to where we're like, what do we do? And then when you're trying to sell things, when you're losing everything and you're trying to sell things that are like wealth consciousness, no one buys anything. And on June 5th,
coming from that red level scarcity energy.
Yeah, you just can't. I'm like, why isn't it work? It's like, well, yeah, your energy is like you're losing everything. How are you supposed to sell something? And on June 5th, which was just a few days ago, we made a decision. We're like, it was from the 4-hour work week. And it was like living the mini retirement, living it overseas. And if you have something that you can work on online, you can work anywhere. And I was like, that makes so much sense. I said it to my wife multiple times. Why don't we just sell everything and go travel and do what we really love? And she's like, are you crazy? What are you thinking? It's like, we got this, we can still do this. And finally on June 5th, 2008, we made a decision that we're going to go on a 2-year trip around the world. That was in 2008. Now it's 13 years later, and we're in Bali, Indonesia. We've lived in 50 some different countries, but it had to take from the worst moment in your life to actually having it is the best. And it's hard. It sucks. You get punched in the face, in the gut. But it was at that moment when my wife looked at me and she goes, I made a vow never to put my daughter in daycare. And I, at the other hand, when I was young, which actually got us to this traveling stage, when I was 11 years old, my dad was diagnosed with AIDS. And he didn't know if he had 6 months to live, 12 months to live, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 years, but he knew he was going to be passing away. And if you know you have an expiration date, what are some of the things that you're going to be doing today? Because we all think that it's someday or it's this, but you always keep putting stuff off. But from the age of 11 to 16, I saw death. And I saw my father living the bucket list movie before the bucket list movie was out. And he just took my brother, my sister. He's like, who wants to go to Europe? I'm like, I do. Who wants to go to Egypt? I'm like, I do. And I got to see the world from this little village. They call it a village, is Cambridge, Illinois. So I was 1,400 kilometers away from the ocean. Never knew anything about surfing. To traveling the world, and I was like, and then he passed away when I was 16. But it was those moments that transformed my life on like, there's a big world out there. There's not just the USA and our little anthill that we're living in. But that's transformed my life. And I said to my wife, I said, we're never guaranteed another day in our life. And we opened up a bottle of wine that we've been saving for a special moment. And we said, we're going to go on a 2-year trip around the world. And if you're watching the video, you can see the tattoo that my daughter drew. I don't know if you can see the date, November 25th, 2008. And that was the date that we left San Diego, departed the USA, and sold everything and never looked back. So that's kind of the story on how it all came about.
What an amazing journey. What I took out of what you were just saying about you and your dad, though, is you probably had, even though you only had that sort of 16 years with him, those last 5 or so years probably built so many more memories and connection than what most people ever get in a lifetime with their parents, because the delayed gratification of like, oh, when I retire, or when I've got X amount of money, when we've got this is when we'll start to do that stuff, or like the short time frames of when you actually holiday or do these things. So I love that idea of, and you've spoken at Mind Valley, we talked about that before, this concept of bringing the happiness into now, not having to wait for the means to an end, and going, right, well, why do I have to work till I'm 70 before I travel somewhere or to do these things, and breaking apart those paradigms. Can you share a little bit more about how the average Joe can kind of break free of those bullshit rules of society and really start living that more connected and more experienced life now?
Well, in first of all, it comes from a decision. And it's just a simple decision, and then you start working your way backwards. There was an exercise that I did back. I actually wrote it out. I still have the picture of it. I wrote out how to create your perfect day, and it was so funny because when my wife was getting started in this online business, it was an affiliate program. It was in the personal development, and we were selling events. And I just thought, what is this law of attraction, all this? And she's like, just do it. And I'm like, for 6 months, I had this journal that was like I think it was like a 30-day program. And I'm like, I'll start it sometime. But you know what? I always had this fear of, what if my wife would read it? What if my friends or family, this fear of, oh my God, what would they think of me? Oh my God, what if it doesn't come true? And the biggest thing for the average Joe, for pretty much anyone out there, is like, you got to let go of the fear of like, you got like, what's the worst case scenario? What's the best case scenario? Worst case scenario is, let's say you can't do something and you're still living the same life. Or the best case is you're waking up in the morning, you're feeling really good. And so I say, like, the first step is just making the decision that I'm going to go do something. And it could be creating a new business. It could be starting just like a podcast, taking the first steps. But it's like, you got to take the saying, journey of 1,000 miles starts with the first step, from Lao Tzu in the book of the Tao. And so you got to actually start taking those. And the first exercise I did was create your perfect day. And I got to write out what my ideal average day looked like every single day. And
I think that's a really important point you just said there, though. It's not like your dream day, like, it's the last day on Earth and I'm going to jump out of an airplane and then I'm going to meet my favorite singer and then I'm going to do this and do that. It's your...
I'm going to do everything.
Yeah. This is like your realistic, like the day that you're going to live the majority of days.
And I got to write out, like, what is my morning going to look like? And I remember writing it out. My daughter, we got married on Hanalei Bay, Kauai, and I was waking up and I just wrote it out.
Hence the child's name.
My daughter's name. We got married. She's named after it, so it's very special with us. And I said, I'm waking up to double overhead surf, and for you that's not a surfer, it's about like twice the size of my head. And they're spinning barrels, and I'm going out for a 2-hour session. I'm coming back, having breakfast with my children. One of them's named Hanalei. We didn't even have a child at the time. She was 2 years from being born. But I was dreamscaping all this on what it would look like, and you start to feel like, wow, this is what I could live like, and what I'm going to do for lunch. Who am I going to be hanging out with? What kind of businesses am I going to be doing? And when you start putting that down on pen and paper, you're like, wow, this is something that I can do. Now, there's a lot of other things, a lot of other steps on creating, but that's like the first step, and it's like start working on it. And I actually recreated that exercise. I put it on a video. I put it out like 10 years ago, and I've met so many people. It's changed thousands of people's life. There's people that are living here in Bali. It's like, your video I found 10 years ago, changed my whole paradigm. They're like, that was the first thing that got me started. So type out and create your perfect day on YouTube. You'll see this old video.
We'll put it in the links.
Yeah, and I have no beard. I'm like short. It was before I got into video production. Now we do high-end video and stuff. But it's one of those basics that you got to take the first step. right? You know, and you got to do something also that you love, because when you wake up out of bed, if you don't love something and if you're doing it just for the money, you're never going to be satisfied, and you're going to be in a prison your whole entire life, you know? So those are the first steps. Starts, you know, do that exercise, start doing some type of personal development, and it's like those are the catalysts. And then just start learning a skill, learning one skill of marketing, ad copy, sales, something to where not the whole thing, but just like learn something they get really good at and start applying it. And those are the first things. One of the things that I learned this from being in the corporate world, where I was with engineers, and we were high end. And yeah, you mentioned Elon Musk. I sold Elon Musk actuators back in like 2002, 2003, and I went. It was a sales call. I thought it was a joke. I really. He goes, I'm a rocket scientist. I'm like, yeah, you're a rocket scientist. And this is. Do you mind if I share this story, because it's freaking?
No, I was kind of. I kind of was poking you about the Parker stuff to hopefully get here. So.
Yeah. So this is funny. So I get to make my own sales calls. I'm an outside sales guy, but I'm technical, so I can do the programming, the specking. You know, it's high degree everything. But, well, I'll tell the Elon Musk story first. So, I was living in San Diego, and these SpaceX, and I'm reading this thing that says for a rocket, and I'm thinking, who the heck? And I started laughing with
this is way before PayPal, people. This is before Elon's like a thing.
Oh yeah, because he just sold PayPal, and then he'd already had his rocket in there. So he goes, yeah. He goes, when can you meet? So I look at Surfline, and this is where you look at the surf forecast, and I'm like, I always made my sales appointments around when there's a swell. So I'm like, I'd surf trestles, so I'd get up in the dark, go up, surf trestles, and then I would go do whatever sales meetings. So I went to SpaceX with still in salt water, you know, like I didn't even have a shower. I just, you know, just stuff is still salt. And I went up to SpaceX, and it was like it was in the hood, and I'm like, am I gonna get jumped here? And SpaceX wasn't like assuming. And so I met him, and I'm like, and you are and he goes, a rocket scientist. I'm like, yeah. And then he walked. Are
you in a garage at this point in time, or are you in a real?
No, it's way bigger, but you can't. It's not assuming. It's not this prestigious building. And I walks through, and then we walk out to this big platform, this hangar, and there's a rocket on the floor, and I'm just like, holy shit! I go, that's a rocket. He goes, I'm a rocket scientist. So anyway, I sold him like $60K. He was like they're the first people that paid before I even left the building. My boss is like, dude, the invoice is. I'm like, I don't know who this guy is, but he has a rocket out.
He has a rocket. We like him.
Yeah. That's my Elon Musk story. But one of the things when I was talking about a skill, what I learned was not how smart I was in engineering. I always like to look at things on kind of like playing the like how can you get the biggest bang for it's like biohacking, right? Before biohacking is biohacking, like how can you biohack or hack something? And I'm like, okay, the way I'm going to make the most money in this is by making the most sales, not learning how to be the smartest guy. But if I bring the right people in around me, and I learn how to communicate, and I learn how to sell, I'm going to be the top salesperson for a technical job. But I don't have to be I was probably the second dumbest person for technical wise. And I would just sit at meetings, you know, like I wouldn't listen, and I wouldn't even care. People are like, "What?" I'm like, "Oh, I got other people that do this. I'm just learning how to sell." And I would just learn, and that was probably one of the biggest things. I started listening to Zig Ziglar, Jim Rohn.
Oh my gosh, Zig's Automobile University.
Yeah.
Like
exactly.
I was listening to Zig when I was recruiting for Parker.
And I was listening to Zig when I was selling for Parker. But I was what I was doing, I was putting it was a cassette tape. I'd put it in, and I'd listen to it like for a half hour while I'm driving. Then I would use it when I got in, and this shit worked. And I was just like, oh my God, what is this black magic? And then I asked my buddy, and he was in old school insurance sales. I go, do you got any more of this stuff? And he gave me the 6-pack of Brian Tracy.
Oh,
I forgot. I remember the thing was blue. It was like this big thing. And I was just listening to all this, and I'm like, this is magical stuff. I'm like, oh my God. And then I just started learning more sales and more how to communicate. And that's stuff that you take forever, you know? So I wasn't the smartest person. I just learned how to sell and communicate.
I love that.
Also, being in the online world, it's all about communication and selling.
One of my tribe the other day was asking for the best sales books that he could start compiling because he's building a sales team at the moment. I said, was it for leadership or for the team to do sales? And he said both. So what would you recommend for someone either as a salesperson or leading a sales team?
The stuff with Zig Ziglar and Jim Rohn, it's gold. But if you really want some new techniques, there's stuff like I've learned to sell from one of my, people that were in our business, Jeremy Miner. He's got just incredible stuff. I did the Sandler system. I don't see it much anymore, but it's like the selling without selling, and asking questions. And I don't know. I just listened to a podcast with Jeremy Miner. We were like the top salespeople in our marketing and stuff, and he's crushing it on there. But like that, I don't like, for actual sales, I just started out Brian Tracy, the old boys,
Yeah.
But now there's such new stuff like what Jeremy has, and there's some other ones, but I can't really come off the top of my head.
That's awesome. We'll put a link to Jeremy Miner in the notes as well. Okay, beautiful. So if you tell me about your team now. You've got a number of different businesses. So how's your team structured? How do you run these businesses from the beautiful bouquet?
Well, okay, so here's our secret ingredient. We maximize COVID. So the way that our business, we pretty much had about like 8 to 10 employees for the last 5 years. We could never break out of that. And it's not having the most amount of employees, but it's having your systems in the right people in place. And all the way, so we've been traveling ever since my daughter's 1. So the last 13 years, we've been traveling. My daughter, she now speaks. She's had a 6-figure fashion brand since the age of 11. So we're a family of entrepreneurs. And we're a family of entrepreneurs that go speak around the world. We have our own events. We speak at other events. So pretty much all of our financials was revolved around going to live events and speaking at them and selling from them. When COVID happened, I was just like, holy shit, this is really going to change the dynamics. And then I thought, oh my God, I get to spend the whole swell season on the Phuket and no one can
with no tourists.
I'm like, this is awesome! Yay!
Yeah, I've been so jealous. I've been watching Rory Callahan and Monty and Dan Carlin and all of which have been on the podcast, by the way, all hitting it with you guys and like.
Did you know I was with Rory and Lo just in last week in Nias?
Oh, were you?
Yeah, so
I think I saw a picture of Lo and Hanalei taking a party wave.
No, and that's the life. And here's what happened. COVID happened, and all of our events were gone. And so we're like, okay, well, what do we do? And there was this thing of like, you always do something when you have time to do it. And so what I mean, like, oh, I'll get to this website. I'll get to this PR. I'll get to this, I'll get it, because you're always busy. And then we're like, well, man, this is an excellent time to really restructure our business and get our systems in place. And so we brought on one person that this is what I do. We're like, perfect. This is what we don't like to do. So why don't you do this? And then he started hiring. And then it's like, we started building the teams, and we had the time to where we could actually think versus being on the road, which I love being on the road and traveling, but it's for the first time in 12 years, we just got to sit back, enjoy where we were at, and really build a solid company from 8 employees. And I think we're up to like 52 or 55 now since COVID, since March of last year.
Wow.
Yeah. So
and how are they really distributed? Like what businesses are they working on?
So we have our Unstoppable branding agency. That's really our bread and butter. We've had that over a decade. I started my Unstoppable beard business just last year, about 7, 8 months ago. And this is a funny thing. So for 3 years, I've had this beard for 5 years. I wanted to cut it. My daughter, my wife said, no, you can't cut it. And they're like, you got to start a beard
It's
company.
your brand.
Like, yeah. Yeah. I'm like, yeah, when I get to it. And, we're always traveling, always had an excuse. And then, like, about about a year ago today, my daughter looks at me. And when your 13-year-old looks at you and says, Dad, when are you ever going to start that beard business that you've always been talking about? And I was just like, I ran out of excuses. I'm like, I guess I'll start it now. Why not? And it was just like, now it's like, I just start making some priorities. I digressed on that, but our branding agency was where we have most of there's writers, we have people on our systems, we have a sales team, we have our marketing team, we have our, I already said writers, we have our PR managers, you got your bookkeeper. Now we're hiring, and I don't know how to do that, but this guy does. So we're like, all right, you keep on doing it. We are like the kind of like the overseers. We're the co-founders. So yeah, the visionaries, and we're able to make the big connections and bring the life to the business. So we have people working in Bali, the Philippines, the USA, Africa, and Europe. We got people in pretty much every continent except for Antarctica. But who knows? So
there's still time.
There's still time. There's still time. So they're everywhere. But it's like, it's really, we couldn't do it because we were at a capacity to where, in order to really, and it's not just like scaling your business, but bringing on the right people that do things that you don't like to do. And I think that's where, especially as beginning entrepreneurs, you gotta kind of figure it out. And you're like that one man show, and you're like, but then you got to start expanding. But then it's that combination of finding people. There's money, right? There's problems, and you can either solve them by, you got your own time to solve that problem, or you got money to solve that problem. And what I as we grow, I keep on like, how can I solve more problems by using people that like to do things that I don't like to do? And so that's how it's kind of grown. But it's crazy, going from 8 to 50 some people during a pandemic. But that's what happened.
That is so cool. Has Rory got you to do wealth dynamics profiling? Do you know what yours and Rhonda's profiles are?
I have done another one, a lifestyle design, but I haven't. I don't know if it's the same thing, but I've done another lifestyle or life design. I'm a generator. Would that be one of the things? A generator in there?
That's definitely in life design, human design. If you're a generator, I'm a manifesting generator.
That's what Rhonda
is she? Yeah, that doesn't surprise me at all. Yeah. So I'd poke Rory to get you to do the wealth dynamics. That's Roger James Hamilton's system, which I use a lot for profiling teams and understanding who you need in your team and what's your opposite energy and how you build your dream team to take off your plate the shit that not that you like. If you don't like it, it's usually sucks your energy and takes you out of flow. So it's like, okay, how do you find the people that is their flow, like they do love that side of things? Can you share? So one of my big things, and listeners know that I'm on a mission to enable 6,000 people to be happier at work in the next 5 years. And my whole thing is, the founder has to be happy and in flow, but then how do we create happy workforces? And that's about finding the people that are loving the things that we don't love. How do you make the teams cohesive? Can you share a little bit about how you manage your team or any lessons you have around building your culture of your business?
No, it's so key to be building the culture. A few of the things that we do, we have at least once a month. We have a team get together. The people that are in Bali, we have that. We have our weekly meetings. And one of the things that I always ask when bringing on somebody new, because selfishly, and this is a great question, and I think you should always think about this when you're bringing on somebody for either working for you or a new partnership or something, is asking these questions of, what do you selfishly want from me? Because like when I bring on a new, let's say, salesperson, like I selfishly want them to produce sales to generate more income. But in order for them to thrive and stick around for a while and really be happy, I want to know what they selfishly want from us so I can help achieve that. And like, I'll give you an example. Like some of the new people that have got started, when I asked that and they're like, can I really share this? I'm like, absolutely share it. They're like, I just want to be around Rhonda, and I want to be able to use some of her networks and being in some of the publications and be able to help leverage me to get on stages. I'm like, that's what we got to know. Because if we can help you do that, then you're going to be sticking around, and it's just not like your ordinary employee. You got to make it to where you focus on your employees, to where we stick out. It's our employees over our clients. We'll fire clients and stuff. It's like they're the first and foremost. So we really cultivate that culture around it's like, so where everybody's happy and we're doing great work.
Oh, I love this. Getting to the essence of the person's why, and this kind of links back. Have you ever read the book The Alliance by the LinkedIn co-founders?
I have not, but I might put that on my list then.
It's amazing for setting up team structures and redefining. It completely shatters the old paradigms of having an org chart or a job description or anything of this stuff, and it talks about having tours of duty. And being okay that people might only be with you for a certain tour to achieve a certain part of the mission, and then you might let them go, and understanding how you can help them up-level their career is what's going to get the best out of them. Because if you think about it, if you had someone come work for you for 2 years and they gave you 100% of their creativity and their effort and their energy and passion for 2 years, isn't that way better than having someone for 10 years that's operating at like 20% of their ability because they're just there to trade money for time, or they're not bought into that bigger picture? And so much, especially being from LinkedIn, right? The network is the net worth. And if people can openly communicate that, and you know that, and then you can make the connections and be okay that they may evolve beyond you. So many businesses that I've seen do this, the person evolves beyond them, but they end up plugging back in. Like Mind Valley is an amazing example of this. They have someone come, they earn to learn, they give them all, they help them make the most amazing products or deliver these things, and then they go off and start their own business, but then they consult back in.
Yep. No. Yeah. And I've worked with a lot of people from Mind Valley, spoke on a few of their stages, and I can see that it's like it's that pot of cultivating, letting them go, and then
it's like an incubator.
Yeah, no, it's perfect on that way.
What's some other tips you could give business owners when they're scaling, like either an epic failure you've had with hiring or managing team, or just something that really stands out that you think someone else could learn from your lessons?
From what I've already said, with doing the thing that you gotta see the things that you love. I'm trying to think of like a learning lesson. There's I'm trying to think of like the biggest like a failure learning lesson for the people. Like that alone, from what I shared with the finding out what they really want, is so key. What has been were you asking like what is a failure? See, I forgot the question already.
That's okay, you screwed off. So I'll leave it open. So I do love to have our listeners learn from epic failures that you've had, so they don't have to go through them themselves. But anything that you think would be a great tip?
No, I think this is us as human beings. We know so much. It's that an emotional intelligence to where you can feel things. I've made some of my biggest decision failures. One, when we lost everything in 2007, 2008, I gave the money away to a guy that, like, you didn't know he was a criminal, but like you know when your heart just goes and you don't listen to and you're like, that's not right, and then it's like and then shit falls. I'm like, you know what? And then after you go through the whole process, you're like, wow, I felt that then, and then. It's really listening to your body. So because we're so in tune, human beings, and then after that, we were building everything else back up, and we're launching our freedompreneur movement like about 3-4 years, and we actually, the affiliate company that we're working with, they closed down, so we like took all our last money, we were building it up, and the people that we were partnered with, which I knew it without a shadow of doubt, there's something not right with these people, but Rhonda was so far into it, and I was telling her like something's not right. Then they tried to blackmail us on the IP of everything, and they closed us out, locked us out of our sites, everything, and then they tried to take your customers. But I'm like, damn it, I knew there was something wrong, and now every single thing that I do, Ron and I, we've been together for 23 years, and we're just about ready to make a big real estate purchase here in Uluwatu, and Ron is just looking at me and like, it sounds so good, but there's something in it, and I'm like, Rhonda, I go, are you feeling this? And we had to pull the plug, even though we put so much effort. And my point behind this is, don't be afraid to pull a plug on something when your heart and your intuition is telling you something, because there's so many times when you go into partnership, partnerships are marriages. You got to go with the right, and when you don't know, you're locked in. So go with your heart. I mean, and it's hard to say that, but like, you do know when things are happening. If it's not feeling right, listen to it.
Oh, I love that one. We've had quite a few people on the show that have talked about intuition, and it is, hindsight is 2020, right? But you can look back at that moment and go, there was something there and I didn't listen to it. And often, like you just said then, you've gone so much into this, put so much effort into potentially buying this property, and you sometimes push through out of ego, or because I've worked so hard to get to this point, and you don't want to lose the time or the effort that you've already gone to.
Yeah, but it's the ego, and it's you're losing face, or you've told your friends you're doing this and then you're not doing it. You gotta, that's just the ego. You just gotta let it go, and you're like, you got don't be afraid to walk away. And business is business, so you have the relationships, but it's like you have to listen to what's inside, and when it's telling you, listen. It's one of those things you got to get burned quite a time or two in order to figure that out, because I remember the first time that I started really investing heavily in stocks, and I was thinking, and that's the same thing when I thought I was a real estate mogul back in the day before I lost everything. I wasn't a real estate mogul. I was just on a hot market. Like anything you bought in California or wherever, you're like, it was going up until when it's not going up. It's like people think that they're crypto experts, right? No, you're just on an up market. There's, it's like you're just riding it, and then there's a crash, and then you get humbled. And I remember this was a thing that one of my dads, when my dad passed away, we had somebody that looked over us. It's kind of like a godfather to us, and I was like, hey, I'm gonna do this, and he just looked at me and he goes, you've never seen a down market. And I was like, what do you, in my mind, I was like, what are you saying, old man? And he's just like, you haven't seen a down market, have you? I'm like, no. And then we lost everything in the whole bunch of stock stuff. But it's one of those things you got to, he could tell me, but you got to stick your hand in the fire. So you're going to get burned. But listen to those, what happened before, and let those be the learning for what's happening in the future.
Yeah. Have you heard of the Silver Ultramind system? Jose Silva's intuition system.
You've been typically, when people are asking me, I've heard some of the things, you are really blanking me on a lot of these things.
Wow.
I got a lot of learning to do, I guess. So can I get your show notes?
You can have the show notes. Well, this is, if you've heard any of Vishen's story from Mind Valley, when he was a salesperson, and how he was like shit. He was really shit for a while, and then he became the best. And it was because he started doing meditations and learning about this system. And it's about intuition and trusting your gut.
Yeah.
And the thing that I really loved out of it that goes with your story though is when you learn about ultramind or the silver system and intuition, it's starting just to daily recognize those feelings in your body when your gut says something. Like, you know, when you're driving somewhere and your gut's like, oh, I think I should go right, but your logic brain goes, no, you're supposed to go left. And then afterwards you're like, fuck, knew I should have gone right. Or I knew I shouldn't have done this. Or you just get that. Some people get it in their gut. Some people, like you said, in their heart. Some people get tingly. You get the truth pimples, whatever it is. And if you start to journal or reflect, like say looking back at the end of the day and going, did I have any of those moments? Where did I feel it in my body? Then you can start to recognize that more and hone and craft that skill a little more so you can get those sort of early warning systems.
Yeah. No, I agree. I like that. And I read his one book, but I remember him talking about that. And it's a daily reflection. And it's just where, you know, it's a feedback loop, right? Your feedback of what's happening. And I'm gonna tap into that more.
Tap into that one. That kind of leads me to asking you about your daily rituals. Now I know mornings are a protected, sacred thing for you personally. Is that still true?
Still true. I haven't swayed away from that. And you know what? I also came up with a very easy, fun acronym for what my morning routine and my daily routine looks like, so everybody can get a takeaway from this. And this is when I speak on
lean in, people.
I always go through this. So since I'm a surfer, I make it easy. I have the SURF method, okay? So everybody can spell surf, S-U-R-F, right? And I spelled it correct.
Even I can do that. I'm dyslexic.
All right. So I'm gonna walk you through. This is my morning routine, but it's kind of also through my daily routine. S stands for set up your day for success. The U is uncover, discover, declare. The R, revenue generating activities, and the F is family and friends. So what I start off with, set up your day for success. I turn off all my notifications. Everyone knows on my team that I will not communicate. If you get communicated with before 9 a.m., it's a bonus if you want to, but like they know without a shadow of a doubt, I will not communicate until at least 9 a.m. because when I wake up at 4:30 in the morning till 9 a.m. is
9 a.m. Bali time.
Bali time, that's correct. I only work on my time. So like I wake up, meditate, I do breath work, and then so it's in the dark, and then I go out. If the surf is good, I go surf. Otherwise, I exercise, do yoga, something, but I still evolve it around the surface. You always got to see it, go there. I go to the Astana, which is, it's like hot, cold pool plunges and stuff. So I get myself in just the best state as I can, because you have to take care of your self first and foremost. I say it's like that. Here's the selfish thing. When I say, what do you selfishly want? You have to selfishly take care of yourself first before you can actually take care of your spouse, your partner, your kids, your coworkers. Because if you're not taking, it's just like the oxygen mask, right? Place yours on first before you can put it on your kids.
Do you know one of Rory's number one quotes around that?
What did it say?
Self-care is not selfish.
Yeah. No, he says that many times. Exactly. Gotta check out Rory. I spent a week with him just at last in Nias, but a great dude. We traded so many waves and barrels. It was so fun.
So fun. Rub it in, why don't you?
I know. So that's the S. So before I do anything, but then the uncover, discover, and declare. That's where I'm putting. Not only am I treating my physical body, but I'm also treating my mental. So like a podcast like this, or an audiobook, or something to where you're putting good things. So like if I'm going for a walk, run, doing some exercise, I'll put something that's going to engage my brain. So not only am I listening to it, and it's not just listening to things, but it's also, I take from those each day, I'll journal on something, and then I'll implement one aspect and then I'll teach it. Usually I'll teach it on like a Facebook Live, because when you can retain each one, otherwise it's just like, for instance, today, here's the exercise. Do the S.U.R.F and retain this, and then teach it to somebody, because you will be able to retain much more and be able to implement it. And you have to. There's people that just like, I listen to books and do this, but if you don't implement it, then it just goes out all the window. Knowledge is not power, but when you implement that knowledge, then it is power.
Well, I always say we don't have a knowledge problem, we have an implementation problem.
Correct.
And
there's so many forces and everything out there. There's so much knowledge out there, but if you do not take it and implement it, then it's worthless.
100%. And if you learn, like if you go into something with the intent that you're learning it to teach it, you already are putting together more dots, like thinking about, oh, if I was going to tell someone else how to do this, what's the important information? How do I bridge the gap? How do I connect the dots for somebody else? And it's really funny because I've been thinking about doing another like podcast, but just as live streams rather than produced, on book reviews. Because every time I read a book, because I often, like, if I'm going deep on culture for someone, I've got 3 or 4 books that I always read, and I reread them, and I learn different things based on the client I'm about to apply it to. But if I can do that, I think with every book that I read, specifically just to teach something out of it, the integration.
Definitely. No, definitely. And that's, there's some of the most powerful courses and everything. It's the ones that you're actually taking action every single day. So this is why the S.U.R.F method is a daily thing. It's not a weekly, it's not a monthly, it's a daily thing. And if I know and I check off all these boxes, I'm complete for the day. So when I'm doing the undiscovered declare, then what I'm going into, and this is all before noon, is the R. Now this is the most important thing. If you're not making money, you're dead in the water. So if you're not doing revenue generating activities before noon, and I forgot who said that, but have all your revenue generating activities, your hardest things, before noon. So I always make
those frogs. Gotta eat the frogs.
You have to be, and it's not just being busy. Like, how many times do you have people, it's like, how are you doing? I'm busy. What the hell does that mean? It's
busy like being busy.
But are you actually really doing the things that is going to have you so where you can actually live a lifestyle that you want? Or are you going to be like, oh, I'm broke? And so you have to doing things such as lead generation, producing the content, cultivating those leads, it's like, and then having a sales system to be actually generating the dollars and closing the sales. And it could be, you could have everything automated through your marketing. You could have sales teams. You could be the salesperson, but it's got to be putting revenue into your business. So that is a key thing all the way up until noon. So from like 9 till noon, I am revenue generating activities. I don't really talk to much of my team besides a little bit before to like, this is what you got to do. And then in the afternoon, after I get through all those on my follow-ups, and it's perfect timing for me in the US because most of our clients in the US, that I'm doing all my follow-ups and everything like that in the calls at that time that I have to do. So revenue generating activities. And then one of the most important things is family and fun. If you're not spending the time with your family and having fun, 5 o'clock, we're pretty much shutting down. I'm on a water fast for the next 3 days, so no wine tonight, but otherwise it's we'll have wine and we're hanging out, having dinner, looking at the surf, maybe surfing together with my daughter, but you have to have that family and fun. So that's my S.U.R.F method.
Oh, I absolutely love that. I'll make sure that the team write that out for us. Have you recorded this as a method anywhere? Is there anywhere else that people can get this, or do we just need to come back and rewatch this?
I have it on like a video, and I've done it on many podcasts and stuff, but I'll send you over it written out. So
that'd be
you can find our stuff on Unstoppable Family, and you just Google our name and we pop up everywhere.
You sure do. So just talk to me. You just said then, like, your interaction with the team. So where do you fit into the structure of running the team, and what's your role as visionary?
Yeah, no, that's a great question, because I used to be in the day-to-day. I've stepped back I was like doing like the head of sales, and I didn't want to be like the day to day. I like to call it like antelopes. I'm gonna use a story because everybody can remember stories, so I can tell you something that'll be, but you'll remember this. And I think this was from Tim Ferriss, and Tim Ferriss heard it from somebody else, and somebody heard it from somebody else. But a lion, he can hunt down and kill field mice, but he's going to kill himself by by excreting all that energy to hunt down a field mice, and he's going to starve to death. So he'll kill himself by that. But those field mice are like these little wins, and we're like, yay, we got these little wins. Or you can be that lion or lioness. My wife's a lioness. And you can really cultivate some heavy, big relationships in what we call antelopes. And that lion will stake out and will just be watching, not chasing all this, but that one kill. It's kind of funny saying this. I don't like looking at sales. We're killing something, but if you're looking at it in that thing, but it's like then not only can he feed himself, but then he can feed his whole family and probably part of the tribe. So mine is really the visionary is cultivating the antelopes and business development, and we're in some major deals with some like big companies right now for their PR and their SEO, and it's not a thing that you can just pull off right away. It's long term. But if my wife and I really focus on that, then the whole tribe is going to be able to get fed. And while our sales team is really, they're not getting necessarily the field mice. There's some that are bigger, but I'm really focused on that. And I have a beard company, so I'm building a beard company.
Focused on growing the beard. Well, that's also looking at like your highest best use, right? Your businesses are built on your personal brands effectively. Like you've come from being a robotics engineer and a pharmaceutical salesperson into having a PR agency. I'm guessing that the PR agency came on the back of you guys being you guys and being that first digital family and learning how to PR yourselves. Would that be a fair jump?
Here's how it kind of happened. When you're want to be on stages, how do you get on stage? You're doing just some kick-ass shit that is like, they're like, oh, we got to have you on. And it's right nowadays, Google somebody's name and you're going to know exactly what they're up to. Like, if you can't find anything on Google about them, then it's like, all right, who is this Joe Schmo? So back in the day, about like 7-8 years ago, we were just like, we wanted to get into PR just so we could have that as on our As Seen On banner. Yeah. And as marketers, we're marketers first and foremost. After we did that, I remember, so we had our As Seen On banner, was great. And then we started realizing, like, well, what if we marketed these articles and we started just doing testing on marketing? We're like, man, we can get these clicks for like, 5 cents a click. Then it started going down. Then we're like, oh my God, we can pixel this. And we were like going, my gosh, we can do this PR. And the return on investment is incredible. And it just started like coming about, and it came from the marketing side of things and the SEO side versus the vanity side, because a lot of people are like, I want to be in Forbes because my ego is
yeah. Just before this call, I got hit up to be on like the top 1% of coaches list on Yahoo. I was like, is Yahoo still a thing? And how much money do you want to be on that list? Like, no, thank you. No, I'm not paying to be on your list.
It came out of like, wow, this is a whole different ballgame that a lot of people aren't tapping into. And how we can differentiate ourselves is we come from the marketing world on it and the branding side versus, hey, I'm a PR agency. So a lot of the people that are coming to us, they're marketers. And when we show them what we're doing, like, the marketers that are making 8 figures, high 7 figures, they get it. Their awareness scale, we can show them what we're doing. They're like, I'm in. How much is it? It's like $50K. They're like, okay. And then like, so yeah, because they can understand the numbers. And when people start doing that, but then we're also bringing in like the coaches, like you can be a high-end 7-figure coach, but Forbes and the big PR doesn't really want to talk about coaches. But then if you start having connections, be able to get in that, And then how do you increase your coaching value? Oh, Google me. Oh, you're listening to Forbes on entrepreneurs. So it kind of it happened out of the branding just by us testing marketing. And speaking of Mind Valley, it's like one of the CMOs. I'm sure you know who it is, but it's like I was at a mastermind with him, and I was like, "Hey, this is what we're doing." He goes, "We're doing that too." And I'm like, "So I'm on the right path." He's like, "Keep doing it." I'm like, so
amazing. Now,
so that's what happened.
Talk to me about building the Unstoppable brand because you've got unstoppable everything, but I want to talk specifically to values and the importance values play in building your business, building your brand, building your team, building your life.
Yeah. Well, speaking of values, this was one of the things I shared. My mom passed away 3 years ago yesterday of cancer. My dad passed away 30 years ago last month from AIDS. The biggest thing that I took away from my father was this expiration date. And that was the value of like, I'm never guaranteed. And I'm like, one of my values, I'm going to live life to the fullest while I can now. So that's a value it's ingrained in our brain with my daughter, my wife. Well, what I shared on this message, I shared it on, the Facebooks and Instagrams. And I wrote this thing about like the biggest thing that I took away from my mom. She was totally different than my father. But the thing I took away from her was that she never missed a school event of mine. She never missed a football game. She never missed a basketball game. She never missed any time she could volunteer at school. She was part of the Sunday school, church, and everything. She never missed a goddamn thing. And they got divorced when I was 6, and she was a full-time mom, full-time employee, but she never missed it. And that value was the thing that you have to show up for people first and foremost before they can show up for you. And that's one of the biggest values that our family has. When we don't want to do something, I'm like, hey, we just got to show up. And when we say it, I just look at when I don't want to do this. We just look at each other. I'm like, got to show up. And we just look at each other like, and that's all you have to say. And that's just a value that's ingrained. We show up for people. And even when you don't want to. And I'm not saying to say yes to everything, but that value alone has been one of the most beneficial things that people always know, that if we say we're going to do something, we do it, So that's one of the biggest values. Beautiful. I just shared yesterday. Yeah.
So how do you live your business by this? What are the guiding, how do you integrate that into your team and the way that you do business?
Yeah. I never say to do something on something that I have yet to do. So when I am guiding new people from sales and stuff, I'm not just telling them to go listen to this. I'm taking what I've learned and I get into the trenches. I think that's one of the biggest things is that people are afraid to get into the trenches. Rhonda lives by example, that she doesn't just practice it. We don't just practice or just preach. We practice what we preach. So every single thing that we're doing and we have our clients doing is the things that we do. So, it's so important. It's like you gotta, to be a leader, you have to get out, get in the trenches and lead with them.
Amazing. Can I now go through, I feel like this value of yours in terms of living life to the fullest has really been instilled in Hanalei, and the way that you bring her up. And I was listening to a story of how she became a fashion designer. So can you just talk us through how Hanalei became a fashion designer and more from the perspective of a parent, kind of conscious parenting, I suppose. Would you call it, is your style conscious parenting or?
I think you'd call it something like that. Yeah.
Yeah.
We've called it that. We've wrote a book and had conscious parenting, but we didn't call it conscious parenting, but we had it part of like the subtitle.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's, what happened is when we shot a video. It was funny. We were living in Panama on the Caribbean side. We went over to Costa Rica, and my wife was shooting a video of Hanalei. One of the things that we did with Hanalei, we had her share her voice from early on. So we were always on video, always communicating, and we did these wisdom of the day with Hanalei while we were riding her bicycle to school, and she would just share, and she got very comfortable with being able to share her message. Not like she's we're putting her in front of the camera and forcing her. She got used to sharing her message. And then when we were in Costa Rica, when she was 7 years old, my wife, she goes, "What do you want to be when you grow up?" And my daughter goes, "I want to be a fashion designer." And my wife goes, "You know that you could be that right now." And she had this like glimpse in her eye of, "Really?" And my wife goes,
"Tell me more."
Yeah, you could be one of the most famous fashion designers. You could even open a fashion designing business next year if you really wanted. She's like, "Really?" And you could just see it in her eyes, like, is that a possibility? Little did we know that for the last 2 years, she's been sketching designs, and we had no idea. And so we shot that video. We had no idea. It's just, put it up on YouTube, it's on Facebook and stuff. And when she was 9 years old, our electricity went out in our villa, and it was hot as snot. I could have slept, but my wife, she's like, "We need to go get a place," and we couldn't find a place. Hanalei has to go to school the next day, and we found this little warung, and I walked in and said, "Do you have a room?" And it's warung's a restaurant, and they were like, "Yeah." And I saw these two women having dinner. They had a nice bottle of wine, and I'm like, "Great." So we're talking. Hanalei falls asleep. We asked this lady named Karen, we're like, "Well, what do you do?" She goes, "I'm a fashion designer." And Hanalei wakes up out of this sleep, and she goes, "I'm a fashion designer too." And we're just like, "What the heck?" And the lady goes, "Well, if you're a fashion designer, you must have your sketchbook on you." She goes, "Absolutely, I do." And Ron and I have no clue about this. We're not fashion designers. So we're just like thinking she's joking around. We're like, the sketchbook, we're just thinking these little funny drawings that she's doing. He brings it over to her, and she starts going through, and she's like, "These designs are amazing." She goes, "Which one of you guys are fashion designers?" And Ron and I were just looking at each other like, neither of us. She goes, "These are amazing." She goes, "Where did you learn these?" Hanalei's like, "They're in my head." And she's like, "All these things of these patterns, like, how did you do these?" Like, and we're just like sitting there going, "What the fuck is going on?" Like really. So then I'm thinking, at first, she's just being nice, right? And maybe it's not. So like 3 weeks later, we're having a get together at our house, and there's a friend of a friend, and she said she's a fashion designer. I'm like, "Oh, you're a fashion designer." I go, "Hey, would you mind taking a look at some of my designs?" So I took out Hanalei's notebook, the sketchbook, and I showed him to her. She goes, "Wow, these are wow." She kept on going through it, like, "Where did you study?" I'm like, "They're my 9-year-olds." She's like, "You're kidding." And then I had to ask one more person just to be sure. And I acted as if it was my design book. And they're like, "These are amazing." And so we're like, all right, now we got to put these into, so we basically, her first design clothing line was crafted when she was 5 and 6 years old. And if you've seen any of Hanalei's fashion shows, she did those at 5 and 6, and all these models are wearing her clothing line. So so she had a fashion company, made her first 6 figures at age 11. She got flown around first class around the world to speak on stuff. She's been on big shows.
She speaks a lot about slow fashion, right?
All my speaking gigs, they started wanting my kid before me. I'm like, now she gets first class purchase, and then I got to buy my own. And, that's how it happened. It's pretty crazy. But the question, even though we asked, "What do you want to be when you grow up?" we turned it around to like, "What do you want to be now?" And there's no reason to wait, like you said earlier, to when you retire to do this, or when you do this. It's like, kids, internet, this is the time that you can just, what do you want to be now? And have the kids do what they want right now. And the things what we've done with Hanalei, we're unconventional family. We took the words no, not, and don't out of our vocabulary, like don't do this, stop that, and we've done it like, hey, we're up there pretty high. You may want to. There's some risk, so we've also we've done that. We've also from like the book The Celestine Prophecy. You've read this book, The Celestine Prophecy?
And I hear you picked it up in somewhere very close to me right now, in good old
And you know it.
Nimbin.
How did you know all this shit? Wow.
Especially when you wouldn't send me any preparation for this.
Wow. You're very good. How did you know the Nimbin? I didn't even know that.
Yeah.
Wow. Yeah, it was
Am I right though?
Yeah. Yeah, it was Nimbin. We found it on the street. Bought it for $1.
Oh, that's amazing.
Yeah. And the thing was, one of the principles in there was to be able to communicate with your children as if like they're human beings. Like, for instance, when our daughter was like 4 years old, people were like, what's your daughter's name? Well, you can ask her. Instead of like, oh, her name is Hanalei. What does your daughter like to eat? Well, ask her. She's a human being. And when kids at young ages are like, they're human beings and they can make decisions, they make decisions, small decisions at an early age. They can make bigger decisions at a much, and they're respected, and they know that, we treat them as human beings. I've seen kids that are like 10, 12, and they're like, oh, my son likes this, and like, what is your kid? Like, it's crazy. Treat them as human beings. Talk to them like they're human beings, like not necessarily they're adults, but
yeah, I love this. My sister, she conscious parents, and we've just been away camping, as you know, for the weekend, and just some of the things that you were saying, I recognize in her. So my nephew would go to do something. It was his 4th birthday, and she'd like, just be mindful of this rather than stop or be careful. It was like, be mindful that this will be the consequence if you do this. Yeah. And giving a choice, like, yep. If you can have this or you can have this, or if you do that, you're choosing or you're telling me that.
But you understand how much harder it is, but how much more value. Like, you have to think about this stuff. And as a parent, because we're so consciously of don't do this, and you're telling them what to do versus you're giving them options. You have to be. It's a lot of brain power, but that's how we raised Hanalei.
Did you meet Eric Edmades when he's spoken at Mind Valley at all?
I don't know. Name sounds familiar. I can't recall.
He's been at most of the Mind Valley things. He is the founder of WildFit, and his podcast just came out. We just had it yesterday. And I was asking him about like, how do I, because I'm a new stepmom, how do I integrate like this healthy eating with the children and these things about choices? Like, okay, well, we're going to let you earn money and pay extra, say pocket money or whatever. And if you really want to have this non-healthy option, you can choose to buy it with your own money. And these are the reasons why we feel like it would be there is better choices. But if you want to choose to do it, and then they understand that, and they're a bit more conscious about it, because it also takes out that need to rebel, or like sometimes they want to do something just for the control or the power of it. And the way you're talking about giving Hanalei decision making and choice and asking her that need to rebel or rebut or to push for power would be remarkably reduced.
Yeah. No, absolutely. I don't know what else to say beyond that. It totally is, it's like, for us, we also, if something's not working, adjust it, and I think a lot of parents will get so rigid on it's their way or the highway, and I am the parent, I am the superior, listen to me. We learned so much listening to Hanalei, and just like man, she's made me more compassionate. She made I listen to my child, and she teaches me lessons every single day. And I think a lot of parents will just they think that they're just the teachers, which learn so much from your kids. And if you're open to that, man, the relationship you can have with them, like the relationship I have with my daughter and my wife, we're like closer than ever. And it's because it's like we trust her. We give her options. We give her choices. Is she going to make some bad ones? Probably. But man, it's like so far so good.
She is a remarkable human, that is for sure.
Yeah.
Any other parenting tips you'd like to share?
No. Treat them like a human being. Asking them, what do you want to be now? I think another thing is like right now, especially since this COVID, where you lock down. I don't know if kids are going back to school or whatever. This is like the best time to have a relationship with your kids and doing a project where you're doing something where they make their first dollar online. It's so powerful. I mean, Hanalei, she did the six figures at 11, but it's like just starting something, creating something together, having it as a family project versus sitting around watching TV and watching all this junk news getting thrown at you and the fear and scare. It's like learn something where you can craft a skill together, and it's family bonding. That's probably best piece of advice. Like right now, it's like Hanalei, I made it a priority that we're going on a surf trip every single month because it's not only do we like to surf, but the bonding moment, and we get to talk, daddy daughter. We get to talk business. We get to talk surf. We get to. It's like now it's part of my. It's a high value. It's a priority for me. Spending the time, because it's like I said it with my mom on that values. I'm like, I thank her so much for giving me this showing up thing, and it's like I regret that I never told her that. And we're just never guaranteed, when today maybe last. And if you keep on thinking that you're gonna live forever, you're never gonna do shit. Like now, it's just like, hey, I got 3 years left. What would I do now if I knew I only had 3 years left? You're gonna radically change your life, and it's taking those first steps.
Yeah, I love that. That actually brought me back to when we were talking before about, before The Secret came out and the manifestation stuff and the law of attraction. But the key thing for me is always about manifestation in action. So you can't just sit there and like hope and pray. It's about taking that first step, and whether that first step is, like you said, designing the ideal day, your perfect day, and writing it out, and then you're opening up yourself to the universe to provide you signs, or like it might be like, oh, all of a sudden you see an ad for something to learn about, or a book, or you're listening to a podcast and you hear one of the recommendations that you wouldn't have heard before because you hadn't opened up your reticulated activated memory. Is that right? Or your RAS system. I always mess that one up. But you're taking off those blinkers so that the inputs can come in. But it started with that first step of going, what is it? Who do I need to be able to show up and live this life? And then the signs start coming to you. It's not about just sitting on your yoga mat or your meditation mat, wishing it into existence.
Yeah.
I'm going to ask for one last set of tips from you. Your top 5 branding tips.
Top 5 branding tips. Okay, so I got to think of 5 of them. One, for branding, you got to do something that you really love. Like for instance, I'm Unstoppable Surfer. So when I created that brand, that was something that you didn't have to tell me to go out and go surf. And so when you're a brand, it better be about something that you really love and that you're like going to do it even if you're not getting paid for it. So that's a big thing. For branding, let's go 2, 3, 4, 5. It's like we've always done things really different from from what everyone else is doing. We like for instance, we're a branding agency and we're digital nomads living in doing a PR firm, like where we don't have something in New York City we're like, let's just do something different. So you got to be able to stick out. When people zig, use that. For the branding, let's see. You got to also there's things that are important, but they're not urgent. And you got to start prioritizing these things. Like, for instance, if you are not showing up on Google, like seriously, like Google your name, you and whoever,
Oh,
and
can you imagine
shows,
what happens when you Google Jade Green? Come on now. The amount of things that come up on Google.
yeah, good. It's like, but it's like you have to start being able to, like a lot of people, like for instance, PR, and it's not, it's really having that so where Google knows who you are, having a Google knowledge panel. That's a big thing to where
Wait,
it's
what's
like,
a Google
like
Knowledge panel?
so Google your name, and if you got the thing up the right hand side showing your
Uh-huh.
name, website, your book, your social profiles, or is it a blank screen on the other side? When you start doing publications and having news, Google will start, the algorithms will start putting it together and creating a Google Knowledge panel. So you'll see it. So Google some famous people and you'll see what the Google Knowledge panel is. Google some other unfamous people and you'll see that where there's not. So I think that's one of the biggest things for branding is actually getting that to where people are going to Google your name before they work with you. They're making decisions before you even know it. And so that is a big branding tip. Now I have to have two more since you asked for five.
Don't you have a guide for this on one of your websites or something?
I do. It's 5 steps to but I'm like, that's the 5 steps, but I'm not sure if this the my five most favorite.
Oh, good. Give me two more then. What would you reckon? What would you tell me to do?
What did I tell you to do? One of the things I did not do is I did not Google your name before. And if I did Google your name, I would have been able to tell you a lot more. So I can do a domain ranking on your website and see where you're at. And if you don't have Google Knowledge,
that'll be easy because I only got a landing page during COVID. I managed to get by until now
right.
on just having my LinkedIn profile.
Yeah, exactly. So if you're not owning your online real estate, everything that you have on LinkedIn, Facebook, Instagram, that can be gone in a minute. You have to start building. And so this is the foundation. This is why it's so important, but not urgent, because if you don't do it now, you're going to still like, it doesn't matter. I can do it tomorrow. And you keep on.
I'm devastated because I missed out on jadegreen.com. And it was there as a park, and I could have bought it a couple of years ago for $5,000, but I was like, oh, who are you, wanker? You don't need to buy that for $5,000. Don't I wish I did now? I've got jadegreen.com.au, but there's another Jade Green that does consulting, and she's blonde-haired, blue-eyed, and sometimes people like it. They have to do a double take.
Yeah, no, hang on. I got to plug this in, otherwise we're gonna zap off.
No, don't go. I think that's while Brian's doing that though, I think that is a really important piece, and something that I have been recommending to all of my clients is as soon as you can, own your name. So if you have a kid, the minute you have that kid, go and buy the .com.
Yeah, no, Hanalei, she's got Hanalei Swan. Rhonda did not have Rhonda Swan until the woman died just 2 years ago, and it just came up, so she got it. I missed out on Brian Swan, so I'm official brianswan.com. But definitely start owning that. And when your kids are born, buy the domain.
Yeah, buy the domain and buy all of the handle. Just go and get all of the handles on all of the socials, right?
Yeah. Yeah. And it's like for another branding thing, it's got to be fun. Something like for instance, if you see this on my
yeah,
beard, it's funny because when I wear my shirts, they're like, "That's you." I'm like, "Yeah, you gotta have fun with it." Let me tell you. I think this is an interesting. Why did I start my Unstoppable Beard? And I know this is also goes with the branding. So this is my fifth one. So I'm not just telling a random story. But when I'm very strategic on when we start something, and I was like, where's our business? Our business is through our Unstoppable Branding Agency and PR. But I'm like, if I create a brand that's evolved around my surfing and I do ads and funny videos, everybody's going to start also, when they're pulling up me, they're going to be pulling up Rhonda, pulling up Hanalei. What do they really do? And I've had clients that buy, a $20 product that's a $42K client. and I'm having that, and I knew it was happening. And I'm like, so I can lose money on this, but I'll be
A lead
making
loss
money.
generator.
Yeah, but it's good, and I get to have fun with it too. So it's cool. But now we're building it up and getting some systems in place, and with our products I'm creating and stuff. So it's fun. But when you do things on the branding part of it, realize that brands are so key. But so that's why we have our Unstoppable Families, our umbrella brand. We got Rhonda's the Unstoppable Mama, Unstoppable Surfer, and an Unstoppable Beard. Hanalei, Swan, got an umbrella brand, but it all kind of funnels into each other. So have that spider effect.
I love it. I love it. So where can people get the 5 steps to, like, your 5 marketing steps?
Unstoppablebrandingagency.com. You can go to.
Awesome.
Yep.
Beautiful. And I want to ask two last questions.
Yep.
What is either a podcast or a book or something free that people can consume that you either recommend the most or you really feel like a business owner who surfs should get onto?
Are you talking about ours or somebody else's that I recommend?
Anybody's. Could be yours if you think that's the number one thing.
Well, we've had podcasts and we've had them had them go down. Hey, here's another thing. Make sure that you own the hosting of your podcasts. We've lost 2 podcasts from people that we've tried. Crazy stuff. So ours are going back up. But a couple of podcasts,
I don't even know what that means. That's bad.
The hosting of your I'm not. Do you know how you host your podcasts? Where the hosting is done?
I have the original footage on my Google, but then I put it out through Acast.
Acast is probably the hosting. I'd have to look, but make sure you're not just trusting somebody else. This has happened twice to us, and they deleted everything, and we didn't own, and we couldn't get anything back. Like, no shit. So make sure that you own the hosting and of it. We lost 2, and they're like, first one was like, okay. The second one was like, oh my god, how did that? I trusted this.
How did this happen again? Okay, team that's listening, please figure this out.
One of the things, but he doesn't have it. I did Wake Up Warrior with Garrett J. White. That was for like men mentorship. They're hardcore. For marketing, I love Russell Brunson's Marketing Secrets. I tune into Gary V's every once in a while, but those kind of like my go-to. You know what? Another one I really like on the marketing side, Billy Jean. Billy Jean is marketing.
Oh yes,
yeah,
he's full on, isn't he?
Hilarious, and he's so spot on.
Do you know you're the only other person I've ever heard mention Billy Jean?
Really?
Yeah.
You're a marketer.
I'm not a marketer, but
yeah.
I'm a podcast whore.
I got it. Yeah. So those are some solid ones.
Beautiful. And then my last question for you was, what would you like to leave our listeners with? What sort of sentiment, whether it be one of your own power quotes, or what's the thing that you want to, almost like Tim Ferriss's question about the billboard? What?
Yeah. I'm gonna go back to I'm gonna revert it. This is how I usually say it when I'm on, like, if I speak from stage and stuff. I started off with, all right, what's today's date? It's June. I can't even read the date.
8th.
June 8th.
So we're gonna this cast is coming out on delay, but yes, June 8th.
No problem. So right now when we're recording this, it's June 8th. So July, August, September, October, July, September. Look at this. I can't even. July, August, September, October, November, December is 6 months. So I'll do this in advance. So guys, tell me, what does December 8th mean to you? Some people are like, it's a birthday or it's an anniversary. I don't know, something. Now, what I wanted you to do is, you can close your eyes on this. You can picture this. But just picture that you get a call, and it's your doctor. And your doctor says, Jade, do you have a few minutes to talk? And Jade's like, yeah. We got the test results back. And you have 6 months left to live. Now, what is 6 months? What does December 8th mean to you now? It means a whole different ball game to you. And if we just really, play a mind game with yourself. Really picture yourself only having, let's say, 2 years, 3 years to live. What would you really be doing right now? And it's like, if you knew you had an expiration date, what would you be doing today? That's what I want to leave you with, because I've seen it. And the worst thing is to be on your deathbed with regret.
Oh, I love it. That is the mic drop moment. Brian, where should people connect with you? Where should they go to follow your journey?
Since I don't own brianswan.com, you can go to officialbrianswan.com. You can find that unstoppablefamily.com as well. We've had that. We're revamping that one. And if you want to buy some beard products, why don't you go to unstoppablebeard.com? Everything's unstoppable.
I love it. Branding to the end. Well, yes. My friend, thank you so much for your time today. It has been absolutely epic. We'll make sure that everything is in the show notes. And as always, listeners, if you feel like you've got one piece of gold out of this, or there's someone else in your orbit that may get some benefit from some of the gold that Brian shared, please make sure you tag them wherever you are watching this podcast. Thanks, guys. Hey there, barrel chasing business owners. Thank you so much for tuning into this episode of the show. What I would love for you to do, if you feel like you got any value or entertainment out of this episode at all, is to leave us a 5-star review and comment below so that we can share the message and impact as many business owners like you as possible. Thanks.